What's going on, YouTube? This is Andre and Lee here from Card Games United talking about the latest set to come out for Vanguard in Japan, which will be coming out on August 31st here in the US, Champions of Asia Circuit, and one that I'm personally very hyped because my favorite clan, Aqua Force, is being introduced to Standard.
I was going to say, you've played Aqua Force pretty much every time since I've met you, so are you excited?
So I think at first when I saw a lot of the Aqua Force reveals, I was a little bit nervous, just because like a lot of the things for them had to be on hit, which usually in Vanguard's not a good thing because it relies on what the opponent gives you. Mm-hmm. And then there was like the whole thing with Maelstrom.
Yeah, esoteric control is pretty huge in card games, so when you're actively handing it to your opponent, it's never good, which is why they sort of had to reel with giving Neonectar clan identity, but the upside is I do think you did get some things that are just sort of like, hey, I restand.
Yeah, like just what made me get a little more faith in this clan is that I just saw a lot of the gameplay videos from people in Japan that were testing. I saw some of the results. I mean, the deck is actually not doing too bad. And there's a lot of variations for the way that you could build this deck because, like, that's going to be, like, I've been trying to think about, like, what the deck list for the stuff is going to be once I get it. Mm-hmm. And it's just, like, I can't get a concrete, solid idea just because we have so many different builds. Like, you could go Naval Glazer without Maelstrom, or you could go Maelstrom. Like, does Diamantes get a slot in the deck? Because Riptide is such a good common. By the way, the whole Riptide...
You've got... you could build around Diamantes with, like, Naval Gazer. You could go full ham on the Maelstrom. You could put Maelstrom in its attack. There's a lot of different options for ways to build.
I think I saw a deck list in Japan that topped, and it was just, it didn't run any Maelstroms. It was just Naval Glazer, and it was a couple copies of Diamantes and a couple copies of Riptide.
Yeah.
And there have been other lists that topped, which is just literally Naval Glazer and Riptide. Now, personally, I don't like that because I think that the risk of only having 4 Vanguards that give you a gift is a little meh, especially when you have to ride that Riptide.
Yeah, riding Riptide sounds like it would really hurt.
I think Aqua Force, though, might be the first clan, arguably the first clan released where, like, you could have a very competitive deck and the VR be at 0.
You could definitely argue that. Just trying to think. Because it did have the benefit of the trial deck, so...
Yeah, Naval Glazer's, like, I do think you have to run Naval Glazer in the deck, just because, like, if the opponents have 5, then Maelstrom doesn't really do a lot for you, so you kind of need to then ride the Naval Glazer to sort of have your quote-unquote finisher, because he does give you an extra restand on a rear guard and gains power himself.
Naval Glazer is definitely very interesting for being such a breakout star for the clan when no one was expecting him to. It's
a good card. It's a really good card.
Yeah. Simple, cheap, effective. What else could
it does Perfect Riser's job cheaper and better. Which, by the way, like, that's the one thing about Aqua Force. It just seems like they're basically Nova Grappler, but with everything that Nova is needed. Mm-hmm. They do a better job, I think, of hitting numbers on Force clans because we have a lot of stuff that gain a decent amount of power. They do a better job of managing resources since our things are cheaper, unlike Nova Grappler. And by the way, the power gain is important because if the opponent does hit 1 trigger, then we're not completely screwed, unlike Nova Grappler. I mean, if you hit 2, well, you know, we're still kind of sad, but...
Yeah, triggers have always been the bane of multi-attack decks.
They have a good early game pressure, I think, with Algos as the Vanguard and Tidal Assault as the rear guard, but there is some risk, obviously, because you do have to consider the opportunity, like the chance of a damage check to trigger. Mm-hmm. And I think this clan has potential. I think it'll be very difficult to pilot, just because the deck build is going to be such a pain, because you have so many different units that you could run, but there's going to be a lot of play testing required for it.
That's why I'm very interested to see what the builds that end up topping are, because there's potential in a lot of the cards in Aqua Force, but the fact that it's not such a cookie-cutter build as a lot of the other decks were does mean that it's going to be interesting to see how it shakes out.
Yeah, I think it's going to take... I think Aqua Force will be slow to start just because people will not top as much because they're still going to be figuring out ratios, what should be played versus what not. But I do think the ceiling for the clan is very high. It's also obnoxious to play against, just because they're going to get an on-hit effect because now there's so many that occur at different battles. Like, do you allow Viviana to hit while boosted and give them a draw and a soul charge? Okay, you stop.
Do you allow Theo to hit to give power and make this other column harder to guard? Do you allow
the third or fourth battles to hit and allow that Maelstrom to restand?
Do you try to block everything?
And then have no hand. So you playing against Aqua Force, you're going to be giving them something. And so it's going to be up to that Aqua Force players to be able to make the best out, adapt to those circumstances.
It always depends on how well you can run that sort of thing, because we heard that argument before from original Neo Nectar, we heard that argument before from G-Series Murakumo, and oftentimes it really fell directly on its face, so it's really going to be interesting to see what Aqua Force players make of this set. Now forget about all that, because we're talking about Granblue now!
Granblue, I think.
Pirates!
Personally, I think Granblue is the best deck to come out of this set.
I love me some Granblue.
I think Aqua Force might give it a run for the best clan coming out of the set, but this is the best clan coming out of the set.
I love me some Granblue.
One that I hope I'll also be able to build. Ideal, get those cheap prices up.
I have loved Granblue since back when Baskark first came out. He was my original, the only card I ever declared as my avatar, because we have the same hairstyle. And it's true, though. Anyway, I just love it. The idea, the art, the aesthetic. And this time it's come back. It's good. It manages resources very efficiently. It's got a lot of power combos. It just... everything is done very, very well this time around for Granblue, and I'm very excited to play it again.
So what do you think it has going well for it that makes it the best clan coming out of this set? Is it the stupid dragon that gains a ton of power?
The stupid dragon that gains a ton of power, also known as Skull Dragon, a name I would have made you fear if you played back in the God, what booster? That was booster set 2 era.
Or is it Baskark swing with a crit just for doing what Granblue does every turn?
So, like I said, the thing about it is it's got a lot of amazing resource management. Calling from the drop zone has always meant you can be very efficient about setting up the right cards in the right spot. It means you can play techs more efficiently. Granted, there are some cards that require you to have extra copies, so it did decrease a little bit on the efficiency of techs.
Yeah, there's that grade 1, I think it's Night Mist, that you have to bind a copy of itself in the drop zone to call it.
I'm sure I'll put up a picture on the screen right now. That guy, him! Yeah. So... And just the fact that they got a lot of very consistent power, in addition to being able to get advantage and get consistency, it's just really the perfect complement. It's exactly what you wanted in this deck. Now, unfortunately, we don't have anyone to get excited about Dimension Police, but they're there.
I think they could be really powerful, but the problem is it just seems like they're very inconsistent.
I actually have been seeing a lot of tops coming out of Dimension Police, which is very interesting. Sometimes just having a ton of power works. Who knew?
And having a crit just for doing it too. Or they're kind of actually the only clan right now that has a guaranteed restand. I mean, I guess it's technically Superior Ride, but it's the same thing. It's almost like a restanding Vanguard because you're getting 4 drive checks with the Great Dayusha combo. The problem is he needs to be in your hand, which is why I said it could be
in your hand.
A little bit inconsistent.
Not road butt turn. He doesn't get trigger benefits, things like that. I have a friend who keeps saying, "Oh, that card's great because it's so reminiscent of Raging Form," and I'm like, do you understand that the good part of Raging Form wasn't the effect itself, it was all the cards around it? But anyway, so as far as meta placement, this set is very interesting because...
I think all 3 clans are very good.
Because honestly, it's the first time since Q4 where it established that... Well, actually, it may be the first time in V-Series, if I want to phrase this a different way. It's the first time in V-Series that every deck coming out of the set has been arguably high tier competitive.
Right now, I would probably have to say that Aqua Force... I know I think earlier I said it was a second... Aqua Force is just so interesting, I think, in that it could very easily be the worst clan coming out of the set, but it could also very easily be better than Granblue. And a lot of that is because I think the skill level to play Aqua Force is going to be very high. So...
A lot of... I think once the deck for Aqua Force is solved, then we're gonna have to start really watching to see where it comes.
Like, what's probably going to happen on this channel is I'm going to play Aqua Force. I'm going to suck for a long time. But then I'm going to figure things out.
Change up your build.
I'm going to figure things out and how to play. I'm going to get better. Like, that's kind of going to be the journey for playing Aqua Force.
And
you're going to suck.
Sitting here playing Bass Kirk the whole time, just laughing. So... Yeah, the interesting thing is I haven't seen too many Granblue tops, which, okay, maybe it's taking some time to sort out, maybe I'm overestimating a couple things, but I think honestly all three of these decks could be very strong, very tier 1 to tier 2.
I would say the best deck to get into tier 1 with Kagro and OTT will be Granblue. I think Aqua Force... I think the thing about Aqua Force that might limit its ability to get into tier 1 will be the Kagro matchup. It's just incredibly difficult. So sort of I think when you have Kagro as being that gatekeeper, it's going to limit Aqua Force's, I think, full competitive potential. Not to say that it's incredibly impossible to beat Kagro, but I don't think we have enough resource generation. I mean, it's a little better than Nova Grappler, but... I don't think we generate enough resource in terms of draw engine or superior calling that we can really keep up, I think, with key pieces being retired.
Alright, so, time to talk about the key cards. First up on the list, we have Ultimate Dimensional Robo Great Dayusha! That is how it is pronounced. Try just saying it. It is wrong. It's like trying to say Tengen Toppa Gurren Lagann. You just can't do it. You can't say it in a normal voice. You have to shout.
This isn't a bad card. I
actually think a lot of people are underestimating this card a bit, because a lot of people look at it and think, oh, it's not good if you can't get the superior ride off. Just getting 10k to your front row isn't that bad.
Also, you run 4 copies of this card anyway, so you're going to see it. And, like, Superior Ride can happen as early as your second grade 3 turn. Like, it's just math. If you just run 4 copies of this card, I think you'll see enough copies of it that you can get the Superior Ride off a decent amount. Also, extra force gift on the battle.
Honestly good. It provides you that sort of pseudo restand. The effect in and of itself is not that bad when you step back, and it has good synergy with the budget Miracle Beauty deck, which is very interesting. Plus, it sort of helps run the high tier deck as well. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a 4 of in Dimension Police, no question asked. You run 4 of this, you run 4 of Dayusha.
So, grade out of 5, I think I'd give it 3.5 to 4.
Yeah, I was thinking 3.5 just because I think it is a little bit inconsistent if you're not seeing a grade 3s at all.
There are a few things that it lacks. It doesn't have pressure in its own merit. It really wants your opponent to already be at 5. So there are a few things that aren't great about this, and I think it'll suffer from the fact that just Royal Paladin has existed for so long with Soul Saver that people are already prepared for this kind of playstyle.
Like, I don't think it really does too much against OTT, just because Protect Gifts exist.
Because you're so used to saving a little bit of a damage buffer and saving a handful of PGs so that you can deal with that Soul Saver, that you're going to know how to deal with this.
Yeah, and I think it's got the Soul Saver syndrome in that after you do the Great Dayusha combo, if you don't really have much, if you really fail to finish your opponent off, I think, with it, you kind of leave yourself open for the next turn.
Although that is the good thing about Force plans, in that you just always have that, oh, my rear guards are getting 20k.
Mm-hmm.
Why not? So, next up on the list of important cards, my boy, King of Demonic Seas, Bass Kirk.
This is, I think, the best VR of the set. No questions asked.
That's something I found hilarious about this, because he's the one VR that everyone agrees is really good. He is also the one that isn't a restander, which just tickles me pink, because usually people are just jumping on with restanders. So, like, guys, it's a restander! But no, this time it's like, guys, it has power and a crit and calls a card!
This thing just does everything it wants Granblue to be doing. It constantly swinging, I think, for 17k and a crit.
At the very least, it also gets power from the card you call based on its grade, which, considering you're usually going to be trying to target a Skull Dragon,
that's
usually
another plus
means
12.
another 15.
Oh, yeah. Like, you better hope you have a couple PGs.
It gets you a plus, it applies constant crit pressure. It's a very, very good card in a very sort of understated way, and I think a lot of people are appreciating that, and that's very nice.
Hopefully I'll be able to build the Granblue along with Aqua Force, and be able to mess around with people with this card.
You know I'll be running it day one. So, grade out of 5. Gotta give it a 4 to 4.5.
Yeah, it does everything.
I like to give ranges. It does a lot. It doesn't quite do everything, because if you don't have that drop zone set up, you're really only going to have the pressure from the Vanguard.
Mm-hmm.
But it still does quite a bit. And considering the rest of the deck tries to set up the drop zone, I think it's probably fine. So, the last of the VRs to talk about, Blue Storm Dragon Maelstrom.
This is a very interesting card. I know a lot of people...
This card, I think, like I said, I think people underestimated Great Ayusha. I think people are also underestimating this a little bit, because I have heard some people look at this and just go, ugh, it's bad because it's on hit.
You're mostly using it for the first effect, is what I look at it.
Honestly, I think this card just seems balanced to me, right? Because if you can build your deck in a way that you're going to make those third and fourth attacks very aggressive, then having this as your Vanguard automatically gets them pressure, which means you can actually turn those powerful attacks into advantage. So, assuming you're able to do that, which I think you should be able to do, I'm not 100% certain what the build that does that is going to be, but I think you should definitely be able to.
So I think what this card deserves comparison to another VR that people said was bad is King of Knights Alfred, in that the card fulfills the role of being that early first to mid game ride, because it pressures your opponent, and it also, the first effect will do something the cannon wants to do. So Alfred was able to call Blaster Blade, is what Royal Paladins want to be doing. Maelstrom here can counterblast one to give your front row 3k, which is very important because it means that Aqua Force does a much better job of hitting Force clans than Nova Grappler, because that 3k now means that things that were 12k are now 15k.
It also means you can use, like, your Tidal Assault to poke at Excel and protect clans. So there are benefits. There are definitely benefits.
It negates the 3k that's lost from Diamantes for his restand effect. The 3k is very important. I think a little people were disappointed because in the anime, honestly, it just was thought to be a passive continuous skill, because he didn't see Leon use the counterblast, and now it's just like, oh, you have to use the counterblast, and that's bad. Meh. But honestly, outside of Maelstrom, you don't really counterblast that much in Aqua Force.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's actually something I realized, is the only card I think you'd counterblast for would be, like, Diamantes or Naval Glazer.
Honestly, I think this card is just okay. It does really have that issue of it has to compete with Naval Gazer, which...
And I think that's a problem. I think if you do want to get the best value out of it, you kind of have to run Riptide. Riptide's a good card, but it means that when you have to run Riptide, you take away a slot from, say, Diamantes, because I think you do have to run this alongside Naval Glazer, because you need something to ride on the opponent's at 5.
And if you do run Diamantes, you want to run them alongside Naval Gazer, so you can get that 3k from the first attack and still make use of the restand.
Yeah, like, it's just interesting, because with the amount of good but not excellent grade 3s we have, like, the grade 3 lineup, personally for me, building Aqua Force and figuring out deck list is one of the things that give me such a hard time. I think this, unlike the other VRs we have in the set, this is not a 4 for the clan. You could even argue that you don't need this card at all. But that doesn't mean this card is bad.
There are definitely builds that won't run Maelstrom. Like I said, I honestly think he's a balanced, fine card. So, in terms of a grade out of 5, I'd give him a 2.5.
Yeah.
Because, again, he's just right in the middle. He's just fine.
You know, it's the fact that you don't have to run this card. I have a competitive Aqua Force deck does hurt his rating a little bit. I think I will be running him at the beginning just because I paid, like, what, something I've already paid for him.
Okay. So, moving into the triple Rs, we have Super Dimensional Robo Dayusha. They've got the origin rare on the front of the page. Ooh, it looks so nice.
This is a good card.
It's a very good card. And it's always interesting when they have effects like these that are so similar to original versions that no one would consider playing anymore. But they make it just better enough that it's like, okay, now we'll run it. Because the resting any number of rearguards is very questionable as an effect, just because it has negative synergy. There's obviously a limit to how much you could get out of it and things like that. And getting just a crit for a high power Vanguard is kind of a strategy that plays into just PGs. But overall, he ended up being a good card just because force, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you just put the force marker on your Vanguard, which is what D-Robos probably should be doing anyways. No, you probably will actually want to split those force markers out like Royal Paladin.
No, I think D-Robo definitely wants to shovel them all beneath their Vanguard, unless you're playing the Miracle Beauty build.
Mm-hmm.
So, Die Dragon, Ruin Shade, Romario, all good cards, support cards, so they're not interesting to talk about. But I think they're honestly all very good.
Yeah, it's like Romario and Ruin Shade are very good for filling up the drop zone early in the game for Berserk to already take advantage of. Granblue
Also, both Die Dragon and Ruin Shade are very good at just being consistent attackers. Romario, very consistent booster, can also be an attacker if you're up against Protector Excel.
I think all of these triple Rs will be run at 4 in their respective clans, no questions asked.
Mm-hmm. And then we have Storm Rider Diamantes.
The one triple R that you could also run at 0 and probably should.
Yeah, you're probably going to be able to build a decent Aqua Force deck for like $20. Just get yourself a trial deck and some Riptides, and then hey, decent deck right there.
So from like the deck list that I have been thinking of, I don't think I'm running this guy initially, because I think that Riptide just offers a lot better synergy with Maelstrom, just because he's 32k on his own for doing what the deck does, 42k in a rearguard circle, and if you do really want to value that restand, you kind of need to run the Riptide to at least be like, hey opponent, so I have this 32 or 42k swinging at you. Do you want to guard this so that my Maelstrom can't restand, or would you like to take this hit and allow my Maelstrom to restand?
And whereas this guy doesn't really have synergy with Maelstrom because he has to restand on the third attack, third or more, which means if you're using him as your third or fourth attack, I don't think there's a way to make him really big, which is kind of unfortunate because
it's just like I just feel like Aqua Force would be better off just running 2 to 3 copies of Riptide. I've even seen some that run 4.
But I do think there are interesting applications for this guy, and that he may see like his own deck basically.
Yeah, like I think you probably run him in like a budget Naval Glazer build. I'll grant it that. But like the restand effect is also just so overly costed and
very restrictive as well.
And like I do think that Maelstrom decks will also need to be running Naval Glazer alongside Maelstrom. So I just
be more careful about letting things restand in V-Series, which is nice because, like I said, a lot of the sort of multi-attack aggro did play into the power creep in G-Series and before. So it's nice that they're trying to sort of slow play it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it'll take a lot of testing to figure out how many copies, if at all, this guy is, but this isn't.
And then a card that requires absolutely no playtesting to know he's a 4 of, Tidal Assault. Yay!
Oh yeah, this is a 4 of. There's no question about this.
It's nice that they added that little first attack addendum so that you can get different styles of combo with him. I don't like that he gets the -5 automatically on activating his ability. So it's going to be a lot harder to rush with him.
Well, you'd probably have to swing with him first, then restand him, swing with him again.
Because if you even try and put a trigger on him, that means that he's going to automatically be taking the -5. So
I think it definitely opens up a pretty good grade 2 rush if you have Algos as the Vanguard in your grade 2 turn. But again, you have to.
But you can't do that thing where you put him on the side, give him a booster, attack with your Vanguard first, hope to put the trigger on title, and then swing first time for just title,
unless
and then boost him the second time.
The other concern, I think, is the soul. We don't really have a consistent way to soul charge on Aqua Force. I mean, we do have Viviana, the double R grade 1, that goes into soul on hit and draw a card. But like, you kind of only really, outside of rewriting, get 2 to 3 uses of this guy. So you have, and again, I think that's why one of the reasons why Aqua Force will be so difficult to play at first is that you're really going to have to figure out the timing as to when to rush and use your resetting abilities versus when not to. Mm-hmm. Just because the resource manage is going to be a little bit difficult. And I mean, this is a 4 of though.
It's an absolute
4 of this guy, 4 of Algos, and the rest of the grade 2 lineup you could split between like Basile, Trident Shooter, or Lazarus. Those are the other candidates, I think, to take up those other 3 to 4 spots you might have, depending on what your ratios are.
Alright, so as far as double R's go, I don't think we're going to have anything interesting to say about Die Brave, Diamond Ace, Gusjin, Bibiana, Pashal. So, the first interesting card is Commander Laurel. New Commander Laurel.
A lot of people have been hating on this card.
No, they've been hating on the fact that he's not old Laurel, but again. I do think this guy has a lot of interesting applications, though, especially in premium with things like Bravest Peak and Stark. Because
oh god, Stark. I just realized.
My 100k attack just got a crit. Thank you very much. Go home.
Combine this with Grand Scale. Oh god.
Yeah. That is the good part, because the issue with using multiple Grand Scouts is usually the soul. Although, I can't say that it's never counterblast, and he does cost a counterblast, so there is that kind of reducing the possibility. But just the possibility of that once getting that 202k attack 3 times with the crit.
Not as bad as Tom.
Delightful.
I guess in standard you probably run this though.
Well, in standard you run this just because, you know, there isn't a lot you can run.
I don't know.
So
it just, I think the weakness of the card is it does open itself up to be PG'd. But I guess it's always kind of been like the counter to Dimensional Robos anyways. Against
Dimensional Robos should definitely be scary against non-protect clans.
Yeah.
Because just the idea of, oh, 100k Vanguard with 2 crits swinging at you. What do you do? What do you do? So, the next interesting double R is Skull Dragon.
Oh god.
Very interesting, very reminiscent of his original self. Big power.
It's going to be the reason why Granblue is going to be so good. Is this guy? Oh, if you haven't, but you can't call him from your hand. Just guard with him then.
You actually can't guard with him because that's still normal calling, but it's normal calling to Guardian Circle.
Oh really?
And he just says can't be normal called.
Yeah, I guess that might be the only drawback to him then. Is I guess if you have him in your hand, he's kind of just like.
I don't see it as that big a drawback, because you can still ride him.
I mean, but if you're on Berserk anyways...
The only issue is if you are already on Baskirk, but at that point you've gotten a Protect gift and you can just discard him.
That's true. Yeah, that makes sense. So I guess that's not even much of a drawback.
He's a very solid card and just an amazing power attacker.
I think you run this at least in 3 if you want to run one of the guy that you can superior ride from the drop zone.
No, the other card is Franger, but we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. Captain Night Mist. Awesome to see my boy back again. My other boy. And this time he revives stuff, which is cool.
Yay!
Alright, and then we're down into the Yars, which we're not going to cover every single one.
I guess it seems like there's a decent budget Miracle Beauty build coming.
Yeah, so Miracle Beauty is legit a boss in her own right, and can even be played alongside the higher rarity bosses. So it's interesting because, again, it's a legit deck, and if you're willing to put more money into it, it just gets better and better and better. So it is both a good budget deck and something that serves as a pathway into getting more invested into the clan.
It's actually pretty good. This set's done a pretty good job with budget decks. Or this set, I mean. There's the Miracle Beauty deck, obviously. And then for Aqua Force, you have just a straight-up Naval Gazer build. Like,
even for Granblue, you can run like Franger and the card that rides itself from Drop Zone. Negro Breach.
yeah, I think that was the card I was looking at. I was thinking of running that as like a one-of tech, just in case you don't want a G-Assist, and you can always just ride that guy from the Drop Zone.
I mean, that's not terrible, but I think the real backup grade 3 look at running is Violet's Franger. Soul Blast to grade 3, discard any number of cards from your hand. It gets 5k, and during a battle attack, your opponent can't call Sentinels or cards with the same grade as the cards you discarded. So this card is essentially everything Antlion wanted to be.
Oh god.
Because it's still that discard 2, but now you actually get enough control to say, no Sentinels, no triggers. And then you can also say no grade 1s on top of that. Hell, you can discard 3 and say no nothing.
Oh god, why is this a card?
It doesn't have a crit, so that means that you do have to work on pressuring. It also requires you to re-ride in a deck that isn't particularly huge on re-riding, unless you draw your Skull Dragon before your Baskirk. So, there are some downsides, but the fact that you can tech this in as a very aggressive finisher when your opponent actually hits 4 or 5 damage, it's just good all around. It doesn't have a gift, which is a little disappointing, but
For how good it is.
for how good it is for being a common. So again, yeah, you could totally run that with Negro Breach and make
There's even some good commons in this set.
total budget.
Like Riptide.
Alvaro. Looking for others. The whole Miracle line. Silbard's not bad. And then you get up into the Yars and stuff. So yeah, you can definitely build a lot of decent budget decks out of this set.
I guess it's worth touching on the Aqua Force trial deck, just because it is technically part of the same set too. I guess if we went into that, Naval Glazer is a pretty good card.
Naval Gazer is, in fact, he's probably the best trial deck boss we have seen so far.
Algos is going to be run as a 4-of, there's no question about that, just because you don't really have anything better.
Truth. He is also just very good in his own right? Just standing is always good aggressively.
Also, grade 2 rush he opens up, if you want to go that route. And then I guess Theo's probably going to be your star grade 1 that you're going to want from the trial deck. Everything else, I guess you could kind of just like...
Well, again, that's one of the interesting points of Aqua Force. You have all these different options. You can play with your grade 3 lineup, you can play with your trigger lineup. There's enough grade 1s and 2s that you could... Do you run Trident Shooter? Do you tech him in? There's Bibiana. I don't know, I can't remember which ones are.
So, I guess final meta placement?
Basil is also an interesting tech consideration. Shotgun Assault. There's a lot of interesting cards that you'd have to look at for Aqua Force, and that's one of the reasons I'm interested to see their final build.
I'll just wait until the amount of experimentation I do with mine. So final meta placements of all 3 decks.
I give them a good out of 10. Yeah,
Do you see any of them threatening OTT?
No.
Not even
Because
Granblue?
like I said, most of the results I've seen... Because Granblue is good. But...
OTT does what it does, but better.
OTT does most of the stuff that Granblue can do. It also has the deer. And when Granblue's answer to the deer is Franger, and Franger requires you to sack, versus the deer just sets up so you can plan the sack, it's going to be hard for Granblue to make the argument that it can unthrone OTT.
But they got a good Kagura matchup, though.
There is a decent Kagura matchup. So that is nice.
I think they will be better. Compared to Destructivore, though, I think Granblue will be better than Tachi's Spike Brothers and Mecha Colony.
I think, honestly, everything in here, like I've said, could make the argument to Tier 1 to Tier 2.
Yeah. And if you're in Tier 2, you have a solid chance to top. Nova's still our whipping boys.
Nova's still the whipping boys. I'm waiting for just one of these days, one deck is going to come out that's worse, and we're going to have to, like, pay someone to make, like, a dancing perpetrator to put on screen. Oh, God. I'm not looking forward to that day. What else do we have ahead of us?
Dimension Police, I mean, could be up there.
Dimension Police, like I've said, I've seen a lot of topping, and I think just the idea that they just consistently put out large numbers is just good enough.
I think Aqua Force might be the best chance to beat OTT just because of the similar reasons as to why they kind of don't like Nova Grappler.
So the clans we have coming out in the future are Angel Feather, Gold Paladin, Neo Nectar, Shadow Paladin, Dark Regulars, Pale Moon, and Murakumo. So Murakumo and Neo Nectar are both on those lists, and they are the traditional Vanguard whipping boys. So, maybe.
I just want to play Shadows. But then I should probably tell myself not to build Granblues and just build Shadows, because I'm sure Shadows are going to be expensive.
Gotta keep up with these releases. The pain of card games.
Mm-hmm. You want to build every clan, but realize you don't have the money to build every clan.
Yeah. Well, so, ultimate grade for the set...
90.
90.
The deck, it introduces 3 clans that all have the potential to be Tier 1, Tie, Tier 2.
It also introduces a number of different decks, which not a lot of the V-Series sets have done so far. It does lose a couple points for not introducing a lot of different play styles, because you essentially just have consistency, aggro, and multi-attack aggro, which isn't very different from what we've already been seeing, but it's everything's got its own unique flavor, and it's all good, so it still gets a high grade.
I think you could, last thing I think I want to say is I think you could pick any of these 3 clans and build them and do very well competitively.
Exactly.
Which is what we want from a good set. Unlike Q4, where if you build Nova Grapplers, hint, hint, me.
Oh, the salt. Okay, everybody. That was our set review for Asia Circuit Champions. Team Card Games United, signing out.